Imagine standing in a field at midnight, surrounded by 10,000 other men. You can't see 5 feet in front of you. And somewhere out there, the enemy is waiting. No night vision, no radios, no way to call for help. Just a sword, a shield, and the guy standing next to you. Today, wars are fought with drones and satellites. But for most of human history, battles were fought up close in chaos, in darkness, and almost nobody made it out unscratched. Let's go back and see what it actually took to survive a battlefield and how anyone even knew who won. Battles rarely started with soldiers. They started with kings. Land, gold, revenge, or just pride. One king's decision could send thousands of ordinary men to die. Most soldiers weren't professionals. They were farmers, blacksmiths, and teenagers handed a spear. Imagine yourself, weeks ago, just farming your land. Now you're marching toward a battlefield you never chose. Armies were massive, sometimes tens of thousands of men, moving together like a slow, exhausted river. No trucks, no trains, just walking, and for days, sometimes weeks, before the fighting even began. And the whole time, disease, hunger, and exhaustion killed just as many men as the enemy ever would. Today, soldiers move by helicopter and truck in hours. Back then, reaching the battlefield was already a battle of its own. By the time armies actually reached each other, most soldiers were already terrified, exhausted, and far from home. And that's when the real challenge began, because fighting in a massive, chaotic crowd was nothing like the movies make it look. Picture this: thousands of men, packed shoulder to shoulder, swinging weapons in every direction. You couldn't see more than a few feet. Dust, smoke, and bodies blocked your view of almost everything. Imagine yourself in that crowd. You don't know if you're winning. You don't even know where your own commander is. There were no radios. So how did commanders give orders in the middle of all that noise and chaos? Drums, horns, flags, that's it. That's the entire communication system of most ancient armies. A certain drum beat meant advance. A certain horn blast meant retreat. Miss the signal, and you were on your own. Soldiers fought in tight formations, shields locked together, shoulder to shoulder, because breaking apart from the group meant almost certain death. If that formation broke, panic spread fast, and panic killed more men than swords ever did. Now imagine all of this happening at night. Night battles were rare and terrifying, because you genuinely could not tell friend from enemy. Some armies used torches. But torches also meant the enemy could see exactly where you were. So soldiers used passwords, spoken phrases, just to figure out if the man next to them was on their side. Get the password wrong, and you could be killed by your own army. This actually happened more than once in history. Compare that to today, where soldiers use night vision goggles, encrypted radios, and GPS trackers. Back then, darkness was one of the deadliest enemies on the battlefield, not because of what was in it, but because of what you couldn't see. And even during the day, the crowd itself was overwhelming. The noise of screaming, clashing metal, and horses was enough to break most men's nerves. Many soldiers never even swung their weapon in anger before that day. Now imagine doing it for the first time surrounded by screaming and blood. This wasn't organized combat like you see in movies. It was controlled chaos. And surviving it often came down to pure luck. So in all that chaos, how did anyone actually know who won? It usually wasn't about killing every enemy soldier. It was about breaking their will to keep fighting. The moment one side's formation collapsed and men started running, the battle was basically over. Ironically, this is when most deaths actually happened. Men were cut down from behind as they fled. Capturing or killing the enemy king or commander could end a battle instantly. Without their leader, soldiers lost direction, morale, and often the will to keep fighting at all. Losing your army's banner or flag was just as devastating. It was the one visual symbol holding chaos together. Sometimes battles ended not with a clear victory, but with both sides too exhausted to keep fighting. There was no scoreboard, no replay, just whoever controlled the field when the dust finally settled. Compare that to modern warfare, where satellites, drones, and real-time data can confirm outcomes within minutes. Back then, an entire kingdom's future could be decided by a few chaotic, bloody hours, with no clear rules and no clear picture until it was already over. But winning was only half the story. What happened after the fighting stopped was often just as brutal. There were no medics, no ambulances, no stretchers waiting nearby. If you were badly wounded on the battlefield, your odds of survival were honestly terrifying. Some armies had basic field surgeons, but surgery often meant no anesthesia, dirty tools, and a very high chance of infection. Imagine yourself injured on that field, waiting hours just for someone to even notice you. Many soldiers who could have survived their wounds instead died slowly from blood loss or infection days later. Today, a soldier wounded on the battlefield can be in a hospital within the hour, thanks to helicopters and trained medics. Back then, you survived because of the person next to you, or you didn't survive at all. Now let's talk about the dead, because what happened next wasn't pretty. After a battle, the field was often looted almost immediately: armor, weapons, boots, even clothing. It sounds harsh, but resources were scarce, and a dead man's sword was still a perfectly good sword. Bodies were usually buried in mass graves, large pits dug right near the battlefield, with little ceremony. There usually wasn't time, resources, or manpower to identify every single soldier or notify their families. For families back home, sometimes the only news they ever got was that their son simply never came back. Left unburied, bodies also caused a huge problem: disease. Battlefields could become breeding grounds for plague and infection. Sometimes disease from a single battlefield spread to nearby towns and killed more people than the battle itself. Compare that to today, where military funerals, DNA identification, and official records ensure almost every soldier is accounted for. And then there were the survivors, men who lived, but were never quite the same again. There was no therapy, no support system, just soldiers expected to go back to farming, or straight into the next war. What we now call PTSD, they just called being changed by war. And what about prisoners? Their fate depended entirely on who captured them, and how merciful that side chose to be. Some prisoners were ransomed back to their families for gold, others were enslaved, some, unfortunately, weren't spared at all. For thousands of years, this was simply how war worked: chaotic, close range, and brutally personal. Then, slowly, everything started to change. Better weapons meant fighting from further and further away. Gunpowder changed the crowd-based battle forever. Suddenly, one man with a weapon could hit an enemy from 100 meters away. Formations changed. Tactics changed. War slowly became less about crowds clashing and more about strategy and distance. Communication improved too. Flags became signal systems, and eventually, telegraphs and radios entered the battlefield. By the 1900s, commanders could send orders across entire battlefields in seconds instead of relying on a drumbeat. Medicine improved too. Field hospitals, anesthesia, and antiseptics meant wounds that once killed suddenly didn't have to. And slowly, the pure chaos and crowd-based fighting of the ancient battlefield started disappearing entirely. Today, entire battles can be fought with drones and precision weapons, with soldiers sometimes never even seeing each other face to face. It's a strange thought. The same instinct to fight for land, power, or survival now plays out through screens, satellites, and remote control. War changed almost completely. But one thing never really did: the person on the ground still pays the highest price. From crowded, torch-lit battlefields with drums and swords, to satellite-guided precision strikes, This is one of the fastest transformations in all of human history. But it's important we don't forget what it actually took: the fear, the confusion, and the sheer human cost behind every single battle in history. So next time you read about a famous historical battle in a textbook, remember it wasn't just a date and a winner. It was thousands of real people standing in the dark, scared, confused, and just trying to survive the night. No maps of the chaos, no medics on standby, no way to even know if they were winning until it was already over. We've come an incredibly long way from drums and torches to drones and satellites, but the courage it took to stand on that field hasn't changed at all. If you found this as fascinating as I did, let me know in the comments. Which part of ancient battles surprised you the most? And subscribe the channel, because we're just getting started uncovering the wildest, most surprising parts of human history.